This is Mark Warner, also known as Fire Dreams Income Doctor. And I wanted to comment today on a radio show, Diane Ream's radio show, that airs on National Public Radio, that aired yesterday, April 10th, 2013, about President Obama's new budget. I wanted to comment concerning some derogatory remarks, in my opinion, that were made about Mitt Romney's $100 million IRA. One of the esteemed guests, Nancy Cook, had made a comment about how large his IRA was and made the comment that it seemed that it was unusually large and that that was not the intent of the IRA laws that exist here in the United States. Let me just comment about a couple of the other folks, not necessarily Nancy Cook's, but some other folks that had commented on the show. And one of them was Mr. Greenstein, Robert Greenstein, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. He made the comment, "You've got to ask the question, how do we ask people on Social Security to take somewhat less of a cost of living adjustment? How do we make cuts in areas like education and say we're going to keep tax shelters for $50 million, $100 million IRAs when they're absolutely unnecessary for someone like Romney to have enough income to live on in retirement?" Well, eventually Uncle Sam will get his bite of Mr. Romney's apple. And the good old USA was built on the backs of capitalists like Mr. Romney. I'm not defending Mr. Romney or his $100 million IRA. I think it's great that he's got that much in money. But there was another esteemed colleague on the radio show, Mr. Kevin Hassett with the American Enterprise Institute. And he said, one of the ways we own future assets or acquire future assets is we put money into the bank. And so, you know, optimal tax theory in every textbook teaches that we need to encourage people, the Mitt Romneys, to put money in the bank because then the bank could lend that to people to buy machines and so on, creating the opportunity for employment and more people to be employed. Well, Mr. Baker went on to say, yeah, I think it's, well, one, we don't have a shortage of capital right now, commenting on how much capital is out there in the marketplace, only because the Federal Reserve's putting $40 billion a month into the market. The problem is we actually have more and no one wants to use it, so that's hardly the issue, you know, in the current economy. But the point more generally is this was a tax scam. So, you know, by all means, we want, you know, wealthy people to invest their money. Mr. Baker continues, but this is a tax scam. So one could argue, and I know Kevin would argue this, he's talking about Mr. Hassett, he wants lower tax rates on the wealthy in general, but to have this tax scam where you could shelter your money completely from taxation for over many years until he withdraws that, that's not the purpose of IRAs. That is baloney. Mr. Baker is obviously unintelligent about IRAs. The government, Democrats and Republicans, have put in place the IRAs, the 401ks, and the defined benefit plans out there so Americans could accumulate enough capital to retire in dignity. If everybody put money into an IRA, we'd have a lot less dependence upon Social Security and more people with a lump sum to retire on. Wouldn't it be great if every American had $500,000 to $100 million in their IRA? Well, again, this is not a tax scam. Just the fact that Mr. Romney has accumulated $100 million is great. And wouldn't it be great if everybody was like Mr. Romney? So first of all, in terms of an IRA being a tax scam, everybody can contribute a lot of money, either through their employer, through 401ks, or if the employer has a defined benefit plan, or through IRAs or Roth IRAs. A taxed IRA is tax deductible for somebody who contributes money. So obviously Mr. Romney contributed the maximum, and had some other plans available to him that are legal. Secondly, he obviously made some outstanding investment returns. Wouldn't it also be great if we were able to make those kinds of returns? And that also figured into his ability to accumulate $100 million. And third, his account is deferred, not tax-free, and someday Uncle Sam is going to get their tax bite out of Mr. Romney's $100 million. With the tax rate just going up to 39.6%, this money has never been taxed and ultimately will be taxed. And the other tax that's out there on these types of assets is the estate tax, which is at a maximum of 40%. So Mr. Romney could be taxed upwards or close to 80% of this $100 million or $80 million. So Uncle Sam's going to get his money, and Mr. Romney's $100 million is a drop in the bucket of all of the tax-deferred assets that are out there that Uncle Sam is eventually going to get their piece of and support what we're trying to do as a government to provide services of all types, shapes, and forms to the American public. So calling it a tax sham and Mr. Romney's ability to use the current tax laws to accumulate that much money is a blessing and a benefit to Americans. And everybody who is trying to retire in dignity should do what they can to put money into an IRA. Thank you for letting me get on my soapbox. This is Mark Warner, also known as the Income Doctor for Fire Dream.